Good morning everyone, how is it going today? Welcome to this week's new video tutorial in which I'm going to show you exactly how to build this application that you see right here. It is a chatbot with a graphical user interface and it is all coded completely using only Python. We're going to be using LangChain in order to communicate with our language models, and it also has a memory and it displays the entire history of the messages. Okay, this is actually a very simple project, so stick to the end so that you can have it in your portfolio, and it's pretty impressive. Okay, let me just show you real quick how it works. Here you have that I already sent a message saying, hello, my name is Alejandro, and it responded, hello, how can I assist you today? Then if I say, do you remember my name? You're going to see that there you have it. It remembers my name because it has a memory. Okay, this is especially useful if you're planning to create a specialized chatbot for a PDF or for a CSV file. And yeah, if you're interested in more videos like this about software development and artificial intelligence, don't forget to subscribe. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. Alright, so first of all, we're going to start by creating our environment and our setup, okay? Alright, so first of all, I should mention that we're going to be using Python 3.8, okay? Since we're going to be working with this component right here, which is an open source component by the Streamlit community, I mean, that has its pros and cons, and one of its cons is that, at least myself, I haven't been able to make it work with Python 3.9 and above. So yeah, just keep that in mind. In order to do that, you can use pyenv. So I'm going to do pyenv local. I'm going to set my local variable, my local environment Python to 3.8. There you go. So now that we have our Python version set to 3.8, we can actually start creating our virtual environment. Just as usual, remember that if you have any questions about the setup or the virtual environment creation, etc., you can just leave me a comment and I will probably make a video about that. But I'm assuming that probably you already know how to do this, right? So Python-m venv to create my virtual environment, and I'm just going to call it venv. And now I have my virtual environment right here with my Python version of 3.8. And now all the packages that I install are going to be installed inside of here as well. Now, in order to activate my virtual environment, at least in Mac, I'm going to do source, then I'm going to go to my venv directory, and then I'm going to go to the binaries, and then I'm going to go to activate. In Windows, if I am not mistaken, you do the same thing, but without saying source, just venv bin activate. Okay, now we can actually start creating our files, and I'm going to start creating my git ignore first. Oops, it's not like that, it's git ignore like that. I'm also going to create my venv my .env for my secrets, and my main.py, of course. There you go. Now I have my files right here. For git ignore, all I did was look for a git ignore template on Google, and I copied the most basic one. There you go. And now this is going to ignore all the files that I don't need to be tracked on GitHub. So now I can actually start initialize my Git repository. Okay, and I can just git add everything and git commit and say first commit and setup. There you go. Now everything seems to be working correctly, and as usual for my .env, I'm going to add my OpenAI API key variable, save, and then this one I'm just going to copy it, duplicate it, and the second one I'm going to call it example, .env example, and this is going to be empty, and this is going to actually contain my files. Now I can say git add .env example, and I can commit and say add env example. There you go. And now you can just start coding. There we go. Alright, so now we're going to actually start coding our application. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to start with the graphical user interface. Okay, as I told you before, we're going to be using Streamlit for that. And in order to use Streamlit, you're going to have to install Streamlit first. And to install it, it's very easy. All you have to do is pip install Streamlit like this. There you go. It's probably take a little time because I don't have it installed yet. Just like keep that running in the background while you follow here. And then we can actually start coding. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to test that name equals main like this, not like that. And then if that is true, then I'm just going to execute the function main. And the function main is going to be up here. This basically just tests that my file is being executed directly and not being imported as a dependency. It's just a safety measure. And now here I can just say print hello world. Then if I save this and I execute it, you should get hello world. There you go. Seems to be working correctly. And now that Streamlit has finished installing, we can actually import it as Streamlit as wait. Yeah, like, well, what happened? There you go. I don't know what that happened. There you go. So now I can start importing Streamlit. And instead of doing this, I can just use st set page configuration in order to set some attributes for my page. This is going to initialize my Streamlit application with a title. I'm going to say that the page title is going to be your own ChatGPT like this. I'm just going to add a little emoji right here of a robot. No, you know what? The emoji, I'm going to set it as a page icon because at Streamlit you can also set a page icon. And right here, I'm going to set the emoji of a robot like that. There you go. And then afterward, I can just say st header in order to create an h1 element in the page. And I can just say your own chat GPT. Like that, and then just add my robot. There you go. Now, in order to run it, actually, what you're going to want to do is to run Streamlit, run, and the name of your file, okay? This is not going to run if you just do Python main.py, because it's not going to be able to, this is a Streamlit application, it's not just a script, okay? In order to run a Streamlit application, you have to do Streamlit run, and then the name of your file. And that is going to open my application like that, okay? Now, as you saw before, we had a sidebar right here with our message, and then we had our messages right here. In order to do that, we can just start doing that right here like this. In order to insert a sidebar in Streamlit, you use st.sidebar. And actually, in order to add things inside of it, you can just do with st.sidebar like this. And then whatever you do, you add inside of this indented space is going to be inside of your sidebar, okay? So I'm going to say that I'm going to add my user input right here. And the user input is going to be another Streamlit component called text input. Text input like this. And then I'm going to say your message like this. This is the label of the input. And then I'm just going to give it a key. And the key is going to be user input like that. There you go. Now if I refresh this part right here, you can see that we have our sidebar with your message right here. And now all that we have to do is add our messages right here. Now that is going to be a little bit more tricky, but let me show you real quick how to initialize this component right here. All right, so now it's actually time to start creating the messages that you saw in the introduction. And in order to do that, we're going to be using, as I mentioned, this component right here. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is copy the installation command. So I'm going to do pip install Streamlit Chat. That's what I'm going to paste right here. Pip install Streamlit Chat. I already have it installed, so it's going to be, so it was super fast, but to you it might take a little bit longer. Now, once you have it installed, what you're going to want to do is you're going to do from Streamlit Chat like this. We're going to import a message like that. And once you have that, actually, that's all you need in order to actually display the messages. Now, all that you have to do is to message. Then you just display the message of your content. It can be, the content of your message. It can be, hello, how are you? And then we can add another message saying, this one takes a parameter called isUser. And if you set this one to false, this is going to be the robot, or no, I think this is going to, let's set this one to true. There you go. I'm good. There you go. Now, if we run it, remember doing Streamlit run. This should create our messages. There you go. Hello, how are you? I'm good. There you go. So, just to recap, we have the messages that we imported from Streamlit Chat. For some reason, there's an importing error, but it seems to be working. So, yeah. And then you have your messages. And if you don't add anything, or if you don't add anything, this isUser param is going to default to false. So if you don't have anything, this is going to be the bot message. And if you add isUser true, this is going to be your user message. There you go. So now we can actually start focusing on building the chatbot functionality using LangChain and using LangChain memory as well. So let's get right into it. All right, so now it's time to test that our application has the API key set. And just to set that up real quick. In order to do that, we're going to use, I don't remember if we already installed it, but if you haven't, you're going to have to pip install python.env, like that. Okay, and this is basically the package that is going to allow you to fetch information from this .env file, which is not going to be tracked on GitHub, but it's going to be in your machine or in your server, and that way you can keep your API keys hidden. Okay, so once that is installed, you're going to come right here and you're going to say that from .env, we're going to import load.env, like that. And this function basically just allows your application to use information inside of this file. And all you have to do is just run it at the beginning of your application. And now your file is available from your environment variables. So if you do import OS, and then you add this code right here, I'm not going to type it because it's a little bit long. I'm just going to paste it like this. This code is actually reading from our environment variables if OpenAI key is set or not, okay? So if OpenAI key is not set or it's empty, so if this one doesn't exist or if it is empty like this, this is going to return an error. It's going to say OpenAI key is not set and it's going to exit. Then else it's going to just say that the API key is set and that it's going to continue the application. That's the first thing you want to do. And the second thing you want to do actually is just to start coding the ChatGPT, the LangChain functionality, okay? All right, let's do that now. All right, so this is the part when we're going to actually install LangChain and we're going to start dealing with the chat capabilities of it, okay? In order to do this, the first thing that you're going to want to do, if you haven't already, is pip install LangChain. I am going to be using OpenAI, as I mentioned before, but you can always use Hugging Face Hub API, and in which case you will have to do Hugging Face Hub like this, okay? I myself am going to be doing OpenAI like that. And there you go. Now, if you click enter, it's going to probably take you a while if you haven't installed it already. Myself, I already have it installed, so it was quite fast. And now we can already start saying here from LangChain.chatModels, we're going to import the OpenAI chat, okay? And we're also going to import a few schemas. So what are the schemas? The schemas are basically just the template that is going to tell our API which kind of message we're going to be sending, okay? So from LangChain.schema, we're going to import 3 different schemas, right? The first one is system message, which is the message that is going to tell our assistant what it is supposed to be. This is the first message that you send in any conversation, and it basically just tells the language model what role it is supposed to take. For example, it can be just a helpful assistant, or it can be a translator or something like that. So I'm going to say that the second one is a human message, which is the message that we humans are going to send to the language model. And the third one is AI message, like that. There you go, which is going to be the response from the language model. Now, we have our setup right here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take this away. I'm going to put it in another function right here called init. And then I'm just going to, there you go. So now we have our init function, which has all of our load variables, then test it, and then initialize the Streamlit configuration. And then afterwards, we just have our actual graphical user interface. So now we can actually start creating our chat. And in order to do that, we're going to say chat equals our chat. It's going to be equal to an instance of the chat OpenAI that we imported before. And here we don't really have to specify an API key inside of it, because LangChain automatically goes to look for it inside of our .env file. So no need to add anything right here. You're just going to have to add the temperature probably if you want to set it to something different, like 0.5 or something like that. I'm just going to leave it at 0. But the temperature is basically how random you want the response to be, or how deterministic, okay? If you set it to 0, it's going to return the same thing every time you send the same prompt. If you set it to 1, which is the maximum value, it's going to return very different completions for every prompt that you send it. So there you go. And now we have another thing, is that the chat actually takes, it doesn't take just a query, like a message. It takes a history of messages, right? If you haven't watched the other video that I made about memory, about memory in LangChain, I recommend that you watch it if you want to understand what is actually going on here. But basically, we are working with a type of memory called buffer memory, in which we take all of the messages of the conversation and we're going to send them back to the API. And that way, since we are sending it all of the messages, all of the history of the conversation, the language model is going to have all the context it needs to continue the conversation as though it had a memory, okay? But we're actually resending all of the messages in every request, right? So that's also one of the reasons why this approach is not going to be able to take conversations that are like 1,000 message long, right? So there you go. So in order to actually do this, we're going to have to start a new variable called messages. Messages. And these messages are going to be an array, or in Python we call them lists, an array of messages. And the first one, of course, is going to be the system message. Every message from this schemas have a content attribute in which you have the actual content of the message. So in the system message, remember that it is the actual instructions for the language model of what it is supposed to be. And in this case, it is supposed to be, you are a helpful assistant. like that. There you go. And the idea is that every time the user is going to submit a new message, we're going to append it here as a human message, and we're going to get the content of it from the input. And once we get that, we're going to also store the value from the AI response, which is AI message, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, AI message, but we're not going to do that immediately right now. All right, there we go. So now what we are going to want to do is we're going to want to handle whenever the user submits something from the text input that we have right here, okay? So let me show you how our application looks right now. So this is our application so far. And the idea is that we want to fill in here like, hello, how are you? And then when we click on enter, it is going to process that. And then it's going to show the messages right here. Okay. How do we do that? First of all, here we're inside of the sidebar. So we're going to have to do that outside of the sidebar. But we're going to say that if the user input if the variable user input exists, which means that the user input has been filled or someone clicked enter on it, we're going to append that message into our messages history, okay? But first of all, actually, we're going to show it in the conversation. How do we show it? So we're going to say message, and then we're going to say user input, just like that. And then this one we have to set is user to true, just as we did before. Remember when I showed you how to use Streamlit Chat? That's exactly what we're doing right here. We're just using the message from Streamlit Chat, and we're saying that the user input is going to be the content of the message, and then that it is the user. So let me show you what it looks like right now. If I refresh this and I say hello and I say enter, I'm going to have my message right here. So far, nothing else is happening. So if I do how are you, we still have my message right here, but nothing else is happening. So what we want to do is we want to take that message and append it to our message history. And let's do that right now. To do that, we do messages.append. And we're going to append the user message, but we don't append it just like the content of the message. We have to use a schema. Remember, our message history takes the schemas. So it takes the system message, and then it's going to take a human message. So since this is the query from the human, we're going to say that we're appending a human message, and as a content, we are going to be appending the user input. Now that we have appended the message, we can generate the response, okay? Remember that our chat element right here, it takes a history of messages in order to complete the next message. Now, we have a messages object, a messages list or array that contains our system message. It contains our human message. And now we're going to send that one to the chat like this. And this is going to return the AI message. So response equals to this chat. And now we're going to show it as a message, just like we did right up here for the human message, but we're going to do it for the AI message. And it's going to come in the response, and remember that it deals with the schemas. So the actual content of the message is going to be inside the content attribute, the content property, sorry. And there you go. So now this should work. I'm just going to set this is user to false. So there you go. So just to recap, when the user clicks and sends an input, submits an input, we're going to show that in the graphical user interface using our Streamlit Chat. Then we're going to append that message to our message history. Then we're going to send the message history to our chat. and we're going to show the response in another message. Okay, so if I save this and I go back here and I refresh, I'll be like, hello, my name is Alejandro. You can see my message over there, and then you will see the response. There you go. And now, if I say, do you remember my name? What do we have right here? Do you remember my name? It is going to say, I'm sorry, but I don't have the ability to remember. That is because we still haven't set the messages as a persistent state variable. Okay, so this is rerunning every time. So we're resetting the messages variable. In a moment, I'm going to show you how to not only make this, not only show all of the messages in the conversation, but also make it remember the things by actually keeping the messages variable constant, even if the application has to reload. Okay, so let's do that. All right, so in order to keep our messages, to make them persistent, even if we're like submitting things and like making the application rerun, because every time we click on submit, it is going to rerun certain things, and some values from some variables are going to get lost. In order to get them persistent, what we can do is to link a variable to the state of the application. Okay, this is not exactly like a reactive application like you would have in React, but it gives some sort of reactivity to your application. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set the messages variable to the app state. In order to link it, we're going to do st set state, session state. There you go. There you go. So now from session state, we're creating the messages and we're creating them. We're binding our messages variable to the session state. Okay. And this is only going to initialize if the messages variable is not already in the session state. So we're going to say that if messages not in st session state if, there you go, if not in session state, then we're going to initialize it with our system message, okay? But if it's already there, we don't want to reinitialize it with a system message. So now we're initializing it with this right here. And now, instead of using messages, just like that, we're going to say that we're going to be fetching them from the session state, okay? So now, every time we click on enter, it's not going to reassign just the system message to our application. It's going to keep all of the history constant, okay? So let's see how that looks. If I click on enter, then I refresh this part, it's going to be like, hello, my name is Alejandro. There you go. It's going to be like, hello, how are you today? And then I'm going to like, do you remember my name? And there you go. Yes, your name is Alejandro. Because now our messages variable is not being reassigned to just the system message every time I click on enter. Because once I click on enter right here, it's going to try to reload the thing, but then it's going to arrive here and it's going to be like, if messages has not been initialized in the session state, then do this. But since it is already initialized in the session state, it's going to ignore this part and it's going to continue with the same value that it had before. And that way, it's going to allow us to keep the history of the conversation inside of this variable. Okay, so there you go. That was how to make the messages persistent. I am just going to do something else right here. I'm going to wrap the response in a spinner. So I'm going to do st.spinner and say with the spinner and the response of the chat. Okay. What this is going to do basically is it's going to say that while we wait for the response, it's just going to show a spinner just to show the user that the thing is actually thinking. Actually, what I can do here is I'm going to say thinking. And now if I rerun this, like, hello, how are you? Then you have a little thingy here spinning while you can get the response. It just makes it a little bit more user experience friendly, okay? So there you go. That was how to do that. Now I'm going to show you how to display all of the messages right here, and not only the latest one, because so far it's only the latest one. So like if I say something like, what is Kubernetes? We're going to have our thinking, but it's going to it's not going to show all of the history. So let's do that in a moment. All right, so now it's time to actually show all of the history of the messages, okay? And we're going to do that here outside of our if input, okay? So what we want to do is we want to take all of the contents in our messages variable, which is our state variable, and we want to display them in a conversation-like manner, like with the Streamlit chat component that we used before. In order to do that, we're going to fetch all of the messages from our state, from st session state dot messages. All right, so you can do it this way, but I'm actually going to do get like this, and then get the messages, because this allows me to set a default value in case this variable doesn't exist. So we're setting a default to an empty list, and if not, we're passing the contents of this state variable. Once that we have all of our current messages inside of this variable right here, we're going to loop through it, and we're going to display all of the messages. Okay, so basically, if it is an odd number, if it's in a not position, we're going to display it as the human message, and if it's in a pair position, we're going to display it as the bot message. Okay, so let's do that right now. In order to do that, we're going to use for I and message in. Instead of message, let's use MSG, because message is already supposed to be our function that creates our message in the graphical user interface. So for I message in enumerate messages, we're going to display them, okay? This basically just enumerates all of the messages and gives them an index for each one of them. So now I have the index and the corresponding message inside of the messages array, okay? And now in order to test if it is the first one, if we should display it as a human message or as a bot message, we're going to say if my index mod2 equals 0, then we're going to display it as first we're going to display it like this. Remember that we are dealing with schemas, and the schemas actually contain the content inside of this content property. So let's say that the content right here, and since this one is supposed to be the human message, we're going to say is user to true, like that. Okay. Right now I'm realizing that we forgot to do something else. Like, remember that up here we showed the message, then appended the human message to the history, then generated it, and then show the AI message. We actually forgot to append the AI message as well. So let's do that now. In order to append the AI message, we're going to say st session state messages. And just as before, we're going to append, but this time we're going to append an AI message. And we are going to say that the content is going to be equal to the response dot content. Like that. Now our AI message is going to be inside of our history as well. And that way, we're going to be able to fetch it right here. So now that we have displayed this one right here, we can say that else we're going to display message.content is user. We're going to set it to false. And there you go. I'm actually going to add a key attribute right here, just to be sure that every message has a different key. Just a good practice. I'm going to say that it's going to be my index plus my user, like this. And for the other one, it's going to be my index plus AI, like that. There you go. I suppose this should work or not. Why do we have a problem here? Oh yeah, missing a comma. There you go. So now this is supposed to be working. Now actually we don't need to display the message right here on user input, and we don't need to display this one either, because we're displaying the entire conversation. Okay, so now just as a recap, when the user fills in the input, we're going to append that input to our messages history, which is stored in our state. Then we're going to generate the response like this. Then we're going to generate the session state. We're going to append the response to our session state as the AI message. And that way, every time the user submits a question or a question to the conversation, we're going to have both his question and the AI response added to the history. Okay, I'm actually going to be able to add this to the sidebar again because we're not displaying anything right here. So there you go. And now if I click on save, and I will actually have to rerun it. There you go. All right, so you see that there is a small problem right here, but let me just show you that this is working almost perfectly. Hello, I am Alejandro. Now this is going to be displayed as the robot message, right? Why does this happen? Okay, because remember that right here we were creating we're just displaying all of the messages in our history. Okay, but remember that the first message is actually the system message, right? So we have to get rid of that one when we want to display them. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to subset our messages right here, and we're going to say that we want everything starting from the first one, not from the 0, but from the second one. So if I click on save right now and I refresh, there you go. Now I have hello, my name is Roberto this time. Hello, and then do you remember my name? There you go. So now we have our chatbot. It works pretty good. It has memory. It has what we call buffer memory. Let me just show you real quick what we did in the code. Just repeat some of the things to make sure that everything is clear. So basically, we initialized our variable, our application, used load.env to actually load the environment variables. We tested that the environment variables needed are actually there. Otherwise, we closed the application, and we initialized the Streamlit application. Then we initialized the chat object from using the ChatGPT model from OpenAI. Then we create our messages variable inside the session state. Now, why did we do that in the session state? That is because every time we click on enter or we submit text input, the application tries to rerun itself, right? And the variables that we don't want to be rewritten every time, we have to store them in this session state right here. This way, if messages is not already initialized, we initialized it we initialize it with a system message. And if it is already initialized, that means that there is already a history of conversation. We don't do anything right here. There you go. We have our header for our application. We added our sidebar with our user input. And inside of that sidebar as well, we are treating the user input. So, handling the submission of this user input. So if the user submits a question, we're going to take that question and append it to our messages system state variable as a human message. All right. Then we're going to generate the completion for that chat, passing in the history of all the messages. And then we're adding that response to the history itself. So that next time that the user asks a question, we have all this question and answer in the history as well. Okay. And then last but not least, which is what we're doing here right here, is we are taking all the messages from the system state variable and we're looping through them so that if it's, almost all of them, not the first one, because remember that the first one is our system message, which we don't want to show in our user interface. And we're displaying them if it's an odd message, we're displaying it as a user, and if it's a bot message, we're displaying it as the AI right here. Is user false? Is user true? And there you go. This is a very convenient and quick way to create chatbots in Python with a graphical user interface using Streamlit. I hope that you found this useful, and I hope that you have many different applications and ideas of how to use this, because yes, of course you can use it as a basic chatbot like this, but you can also use it to make specialized chatbots. For example, for the PDF chatbot that we created a few videos ago. That video is also in this playlist, so if you want to check it out, don't hesitate to click on somewhere on the screen. And yeah, I hope that this was useful. I hope that you found this educational. Subscribe for more videos like this. And yeah, I'll see you next time.